This is a weapon you would probably think isn't real. It looks odd, unconventional, and most importantly completely impractical. Well, this is the Kolibri, a minuscule semi-automatic pistol that fires 2.7mm rounds. It's a weapon so small that in real life it could quite literally fit in the palm of your hand, and yet somehow DICE recreated it in Battlefield 1. Its story begins in the early 20th century with a man who was a craftsman. Its creator, Franz Fanel, was an Austrian watchmaker, and that detail matters because watchmakers are known for their meticulous precision work, crafting intricate mechanisms on a microscopic scale. And Fanel applied that same skill and detail to weapon design, producing one of the smallest self-loading pistols in history. It was patented in 1910 and produced in limited numbers from 1914 to around 1918. The Kolibri was marketed primarily as a civilian self-defense weapon. At the time, small pistols were in demand for personal protection, particularly among wealthy urban Europeans. Carrying a full-sized revolver was considered bulky, conspicuous and socially unacceptable for some. The Kolibri, with its diminutive size, could be carried discreetly in a pocket or even a lady's purse. Its small size made it perfect for concealment. The Kolibri fired a 2.7x9mm Kolibri centerfire cartridge, which was and remains one of the smallest commercially produced centerfire rounds ever made. The bullet itself weighed about 0.19 grams and travelled at roughly 200 meters per second. The muzzle energy was around 3 joules, which for perspective is weaker than most modern airsoft guns and only slightly stronger than a rubber band snap. This lack of stopping power made it essentially useless against anyone wearing heavy clothing, let alone a soldier. Contemporary firearms experts at the time noted that the round's penetration was so low that in many cases it couldn't reliably pierce skins at longer distances. The Kolibri was just 2.7 inches long and weighing roughly 200 grams. The Kolibri was absurdly small, so much so that loading it was a delicate process as the tiny cartridges were easy to fumble. The sights were rudimentary and the grip was barely large enough to hold with 2 fingers. It was a blowback operated semi-automatic pistol, mechanically simple but finicky in use. And although it was technically available during World War I, the Kolibri saw virtually no combat use. By that time militaries were standardising on far more powerful sidearms like the Luger P08, Webley revolver or Colt M1911. The Kolibri's intended market was, like I said, civilians, particularly the growing middle and upper class who wanted the prestige of owning a firearm without the inconvenience of carrying a large one. However, the Kolibri was expensive to produce, delicate to maintain and widely underpowered. Within a few years it became clear that it was a novelty at best. Production numbers are uncertain, but historians estimate that fewer than 1,000 units were ever made. And a century later, DICE resurrected it in Battlefield 1. When Battlefield 1 launched in 2016, it stood out for embracing World War I, a conflict ignored by mainstream shooters for the most part. The weapons the game offered were bolt-action rifles, light machine guns and clunky early submachine guns, along with the one thing Germans hated the most: shotgun. But buried under all that firepower was a small and ridiculous Kolibri pistol. DICE recreated the Kolibri with great historical accuracy. The model in-game is nearly identical to the real-world weapon. Tiny grip, delicate trigger, and comically short barrel. The reload animation even includes the player delicately handling the microscopic rounds, emphasising just how absurdly small this thing is compared to everything else in the game. To unlock the Kolibri, you had to reach rank 10 with a scout class before unlocking it, which meant it took a while for you to get, and honestly unlocking it was a little bit weird, because on one hand you felt disappointed that after reaching rank 10 you were receiving a weapon that was practically useless. But then on the other hand it was somewhat funny that this gun even existed in the game, and now you could use it to potentially kill someone. And actually getting a kill with this thing was so satisfying simply because of how difficult it was, but then being killed by it was the biggest embarrassment that could happen to you. But not only is the Kolibri the smallest weapon in Battlefield history, it might just be the weakest gun too. At point blank range it requires 4 body shots to kill an enemy, and up to 8 at longer ranges. Headshots do slightly better as it had a 4 times multiplier, but even those won't down a full health opponent in less than 2 hits. The range was effectively 0, beyond a few meters you were just wasting bullets. It held 8 rounds in a magazine, which sounds decent until you realise that is just enough to kill one person. if you don't miss your shots. The reload time was 1.6 seconds or 2.2 seconds with an empty mag. Fast in theory, but slow in practice when enemies are armed with rifles that can kill you in one shot. Simply put, the Kolibri is an offensive weapon in name only. It's not meant for firefights. Pulling it out in a 1v1 fight is almost a death wish unless the enemy is already on low HP. So why did DICE put such a useless weapon into Battlefield 1? Well, the Kolibri serves as Battlefield's one novelty weapon, similar in ways to the crossbows of BF4 for example, although the crossbow was way more effective. The weapon is still grounded in historical fact, and it showcases a weapon that many people wouldn't believe existed in that time period. It also offers a challenge for players brave enough to actually use it properly. Not only that, but it became an instant meme upon release. Content creators are doing Kolibri only challenge runs, the longest kill with a Kolibri, or going on crazy kill streaks using the weapon. But my favourite part of the Kolibri is the presentation, how the character handles it delicately, almost as if it's a fragile piece of jewellery rather than a gun. The sound it makes is a tiny pathetic pop rather than a bang. Compared to a shotgun or a bolt action rifle, the Kolibri's sound is almost adorable. The Kolibri may be statistically the weakest weapon in Battlefield 1, but it's also one of the most iconic in my opinion. I always thought it was a nice touch to add something so comedic into a setting as dark and brutal as the First World War. It was also the complete opposite to the other level 10 scout unlock that you received, the Martini Henry, which at launch was completely broken and could one-shot people and was basically hit scan. And the two weapons actually weirdly complemented each other. If you didn't kill someone with the Martini Henry, you most likely left them low enough to get the finishing blow with the Kolibri. Although the Kolibri is the smallest and weakest weapon in Battlefield history, it's also one of the most iconic. And I guess it's a reminder at the end of the day, size doesn't matter.